Okay, repeat after me. Serenity now, serenity now. Let's look at this issue. So, um, we have a problem, and we're trying to solve the problem. Um, this view over here probably doesn't help in any way to solve the problem. What we need is to see this drawing. So it would be great to crop away this drawing, put a nice big image of the drawing to ask the question instead of the small image. But one of the things that we know about a parametric CAD program is we can step through the timeline and see exactly how something was created. And so we could open up the file that was attached and follow that timeline to see how this rectangle was revolved to get this cylinder. But we, the request is to attach the file so we can see where the problem is. It says, please tell me what I did wrong. I'm trying to learn this program. So we'll look at a picture. And a picture doesn't tell us very much. We can't see the sketches. We don't know how that's happening. We don't see a revolve here that was in the previous attachment, and that was the instructions to use the revolve. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video might be worth 1,000 pictures, and then an actual model might be worth 1,000 videos. So let's follow this video and see if we can figure out how we might create this geometry. Okay, so I'm going to go to Fusion. And actually, I'll look at the file that was attached finally. And if I edit sketch number 1, well, first thing I see is no thumbtack on the sketch. So a sketch that doesn't have a thumbtack is not fully defined. And we should stop. We shouldn't say it's down here on the timeline. There was a sketch and then a feature and then a feature and then another sketch and a feature. This should have been stopped right here. Do not continue, do not go past go. We got to figure out how to fully define that sketch. So I'm going to edit this sketch, and I see that it only has a couple of dimensions on here. Every piece of geometry should be dimensioned with the dimensions that the person out on the shop floor would need in order to make that part. A couple other quick things is it's often best to put fillets, especially small fillets like this, put those in as features rather than as sketch elements. And and then I'll come over here and I notice this circle isn't black, it isn't fully defined. And if I try dragging the circle, I see that it goes anywhere. Now it's I don't know how, it's kind of difficult to really miss the origin. So let's just start a new part file and see if we can do this again from scratch. And so I'm going to do a new part file, and I'm going to change my units to inches. And I'll go to whatever plane you want to start on. In this case, I'm going to start it on the XY plane, and I'll create a new sketch. All right, it's a good practice to select a logical location as a datum or the origin. And this, I'm going to put the circle here at the origin, and I'm going to put in the 0.314 as the diameter. Notice that it turns black. It is fully defined. So one thing that I tell beginners to do is to create one circle or one line or one rectangle, or in some cases one polygon, and dimension that geometry immediately so that you have a sense of scale for the rest of the sketch. And so we've got that in. I'm going to draw the next circle. Now this circle, actually on the original, that little teeny tiny, I guess I closed it, that little teeny tiny little drawing that we had, as best I could figure out, it was 0.41 radius. So I'm going to dimension this circle, and I'm going to right click and I'll tell it do a radius dimension, and I'll dimension that as 0.41 radius. Notice that circle turns black. It's fully constrained. So every time I do something, I make sure that it's fully constrained. And we've done a couple of things right, so let's go ahead and save this. I don't know what I'm just going to call arm. You know, every time we do something right, save it. There's no excuse for losing work. Then I'm going to draw an arc out here, and I'm trying to decide whether to draw a line or an arc. I'll do the line first. So I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to click and hold my mouse button down. I'm not going to let go of the mouse. So notice that as I go around, wherever I go, it's going to put that tangent constraint on there for me automatically. So I'm going to come up to about here, and I will click to put in that line. I see the tangent constraint here on that line. I'm going to put another line in here, and I'm going to draw this line from here up to here. Now I don't know how long this line is yet, but this is going to be a construction line. I'm just using it for construction purposes. So I'm going to right click and change that to a construction line type. I'm then going to draw a circle, and I'm going to put that circle out here in space, something like this. And then I'm going to either trim this off or drag this line back to that arc. And then I'm going to make this arc tangent to this circle. So I'll do tangent. This arc is tangent to that circle. I want to dimension the radius of this arc now. So I'll dimension. Now I'm going to end up trimming this off. So if I go ahead and trim it now, it will make it easier to put in that. I don't have to right click and do that radius dimension. It'll automatically do a radius dimension. And I'm going to end up trimming it actually off to this arc. So let's trim that again. Okay, I'll put in the dimension. The radius of this arc on the drawing is 2.44. Okay. And then the distance from the center of this arc over to our origin, that horizontal distance is 1 inch. Notice that when I do that, that the arc itself turned black. Now I see that this line is supposed to be at 50 degrees from the vertical. So we'll go ahead and put in that 50 degrees. Now I'll dimension from this line over to this line. I'll put in 50 degrees, and this line turns black. So if we use a real disciplined approach of going through this step by step, we shouldn't run into any issues. I'm going to now draw an arc from here over to about here, and I'm going to do that as a 3-point arc. So I'm going to select about right there, I'll come over here about right there, and I'll click right here. Now I want this arc to be tangent to this arc, so I'll add that tangent constraint. between here and here, so we see that that's tangent. I'm going to dimension the radius of this arc, and the radius of this arc is 2 inches. And then I need to dimension the center point location of this arc, and that's given on the drawing from here up to the origin. That vertical height is given, and actually I clicked on this point. I need to come down there and click on this point. So from here to the center of this arc, that vertical distance is given as 1.94. Right. Notice that that arc turned black, except for this endpoint here. It's still white. That endpoint, you know, isn't fully defined yet. We will get that defined as we go along. All right. I also have an arc up here, and so I'm going to draw again a 3-point arc, and I'm going to click something. Now, be careful. I'm not going to, you know, it's picking the midpoint of this line, or I don't want it this quadrant. I'm going to get it over here someplace, and I'll come out here, and I'll click someplace, and I'll just put in that arc. Now I want this arc to be tangent to that arc, so I'll do tangent this arc, tangent to that arc. Now when I did that, it moved this endpoint down. I want to move this up here, something about like that. And I'll go ahead and dimension the radius of this arc, and the radius of this arc is 3.81. Okay, and again I'll move the end of it out here, and let's dimension the location of the center of this arc. And I want it on this side of center. Depending on how you when you created it, the center point might be over here. Just drag it over to the approximate location, and see, when we started out with that first circle, that gives us a sense of scale for everything else that we're doing. And then I'll dimension the distance horizontally. 0.62. Okay, I might drag this dimension up in here someplace. Alright, so now this arc is turned black, except for the endpoint. We'll drag this endpoint down here, about like that. Now we could trim off this arc right here. We could trim it here and here, but we don't really need to. But let's just see what happens if we do trim it. So I'm gonna trim this arc, and I'm gonna trim it here. And sometimes when you do that, you'll lose a constraint, in which you may need to put in a dimension or constraint. For example, you might need to make this arc equal to that one, or something like that. But I'm gonna undo that, because you don't even really need to do it. But that's one thing that it could cause a problem is you may lose a constraint that you were depending on, or a dimension that you were depending on. But it's not really a big deal if you fix it right away. Don't wait 20 minutes till you have 10,000 other lines on the screen and then try to fix it. Fix the issues as they occur. Alright, then I'm going to do a 3-point arc over here, from here to here, about like that. And the center of this arc is actually at the origin. Now let me go ahead and dimension this arc, and it's 2 inches. And then I want the center, and I could have done a circle over there and just trimmed it off, but I'll do coincident, the center of this arc at the origin. When I do, it all turns black. It's all fully defined. Okay, again, there's a small fillet here and a small fillet here, but we could ignore those two small fillets for now. Now, I've got a cylinder, and this was what brought the question up. I have a cylinder, a pin, that goes in here at 10-degree angle. I'm going to do that as a rectangle. So I'm doing all of my sketch on either the XY, the XZ, or the YZ plane. That's called the Bourne technique, base orphan reference node. This geometry can't be erased, and so you're less likely to run into problems if you create all of your sketches on the origin planes and use the origin center point as your datum reference, if possible. While I'm at it, let's go ahead and trim off the top because this line is still unconstrained. I could drag this down or trim it off, either one. I'm just going to do a trim here and trim off that excess there. Alright, then I'm going to, and when I did that, if I come over here, we'll see that there's a thumbtack on this sketch letting me know that it's fully constrained. Alright, now I want to put that, so I'm going to do that as a rectangle. So I'm going to put a rectangle over here, and I'm putting, actually I don't want a vertical like that. I want it at an angle, and so I'm going to create a 3-point rectangle, and I'm going to put one point about right here, one point about right here. Now as you're doing this, be careful that it's not automatically putting a constraint to some other geometry. Now I know that the diameter of this, I want it to be a certain value. I'm going to dimension, and I'm going to make this my center line. So I'm going to dimension from this line over to this line, and I'm going to right click, and I'll say give me a diameter dimension, and then I'll click on the screen, and I'm going to make that diameter 0.152. Okay. And then I want the angle between the center of this and this line to be 10 degrees. So I'll click on this construction line, I'll click on this line, and I'll put in that 10 degrees. Now the question then is where to locate this. If I bring this down to here, I'm gonna notice that there's a gap there that wouldn't be closed. So the easiest way though to constrain that might be to put the midpoint of this line on to this arc. And so I'll do a midpoint constraint. I'll select this line, I'll select this arc, and that moved the midpoint of that line. Actually, it moved it over here to the midpoint of this line. That's the arc. That's not what I want. I'm going to undo that. Let's put a construction point here at the midpoint of this line, and then I'll do a coincident between this construction point and the sketch point and that arc. Now it's unclear to me where the distance from here down to here is supposed to go, whether it should go from here to here, or but I'm going to put another point, and I'm going to put it out here at this intersection, and then I'll dimension the distance from this point to this line, and that distance 0.16. Now I need one more dimension on this, and notice I can drag this around, and I need one last dimension to locate this rectangle. On the original drawing, which is all but impossible to see because it's so small, and I could try to zoom in on this, but it's just so small, and then if I do zoom in on it, it's kind of and now I don't even know why I can't even zoom in on it. It's really difficult to see poor quality, and anyways, from the center of this arc, that center line of this pin is on that center line. So you see the trouble with posting poor quality images on the internet. And anyway, so I'll do coincident. I want this line, the center of this pin, to be coincident with the center of this 2-inch radius arc. And when I do, So if you drew an imaginary line, and we could just go ahead, sometimes it's a good idea to put in these construction lines so that a year from now, I'll change that to a construction line. A year from now, if you're trying to figure out, how something was done and you forgot how you did it, or a week from now, if your memory is as poor as mine, or yesterday is actually, then put in this construction geometry, and that will help you recall what you did, how that was constrained. And now some of this could be done on multiple sketches to keep the sketch simple. For example, you could put this on another sketch. You could put some of this other, use multiple sketches. I'm going to draw another line over here, and I'm actually going to make it tangent to this arc. So I'm going to hold the mouse button down. I'll click on that arc. I'll come down here and let go of it onto that. And so now it's tangent to that arc. And then I'm going to dimension the angle between this line and this line as 45 degrees. Now I don't really need to, the radius is constant on this, so I don't really need the radius, but I want to check this dimension from here over to here. So I'm going to dimension from here over to this line, and I see that is a different dimension than what was given on the original drawing. And notice that this it says that it's in parentheses. That means it's a reference dimension. It's not a driving dimension, it's a driven dimension. So I need to go back to the drawing and take another look at it and figure out what the intent was on that. So I've got to do this, look at the poor quality drawing again. Well, I just don't know what to do with, this. I haven't used this over here at all. This was the original drawing that was posted. I'll try to zoom in on here, and it appears that that's 0.47 radius there, and then this distance is 0.47. So let's go back to the drawing, the sketch. Alright, so I'm going to delete this. Apparently it isn't tangent to that arc, and it isn't coincident to it either, so I'll delete the coincident, and then that gives me that free to move out here. I'm going to delete this dimension, and I'm going to dimension then the distance from here over to this line as 0.47. Okay, then I'm going to put the arc in that goes from here up to here. So I'll do an arc. I'll do from here up to here, and I'm going to come over about here, and I want it to automatically put the tangent right there. So I'm going to click here so that it puts the tangent at that location. Now looking at the drawing, it looks like the radius of that arc is going to the center or the origin. So I will do a coincident constraint between the center of that arc and the origin, and it didn't want to do it there. Let me try it again and see if I could just drag it. Okay, so it won't let me drag it up there. Okay, so I'm trying to drag this point up here, and for some reason it won't let me drag it up, and I don't see immediately why. I'm just going to delete these two and put them in again. So this time I'll do the arc. I'll do it from here to about here, about like that. I'll go ahead and do the coincident now. So I'll do the coincident to the center, and and then I will let's drag this up a little bit, and then I'll put in the line that goes from here down to here. Now be careful that it doesn't automatically put, say, a parallel to that line over there. I want it tangent to the arc, and then I will dimension the distance from here to here, which is also the radius of that arc. And so I'll do 0.47. Because this arc is tangent to that line, you know, that's also the 0.47, so we don't really need that dimension. We could put it in there as a reference dimension if somebody might need to see that later on, you know, for the cutter tool purposes. They might want to see that. But let's go ahead and put in the angle then from here to here, and then that is the 45. Now we didn't trim off this area right in here, but we can still select that area. We can select, so if I want to extrude this area and this area and this area, you know, I can select those areas, extrude those whatever distance I need. If I want to revolve this area, I select both of these areas, and watch out that you don't have any little pieces that you're missing. And I'll select the axis, and I'll select that area, and of course you'll join all of this stuff together. When you do your extrusions, do the extrusions mid-plane, so that you know, you always look for symmetry about the origin planes, and then we'll do that, and then do these ends, these small fillets, as fillet features rather than as sketch features. So that should give you some ideas on how to do a fully defined sketch as you go along.